shake that.
Hey guys, thank you. Good morning, everybody. On this Monday, breaking news, and we have new information out of London at this hour. This is brand new video of more police raids from overnight. British investigators now saying they know the names of the alleged London terrorists. And here at home, President Trump vowing to protect the U.S. from what he calls a vile enemy as he pushes forward on his travel ban. There was a lot to get to on this Monday as we start anew. I'm Bill Hemmer, live here in America's Newsroom. Nice to see you on Sunday.
And now on Monday.
And today, you bet.
All right, I'm Shannon Bream here in New York. British Prime Minister Theresa May adopting a stronger tone over the last 2 days after the third terror attack on her country in just 3 months.
We cannot go on as we are. Enough is enough. We must do more, much more, to take on and defeat the evil ideology of Islamist extremism that preaches hatred, sows division, and promotes sectarianism.
So meanwhile, President Trump says that the U.S. stands with Britain, while here at home he's turning up the heat yet again on the courts over his travel ban. He calls it a necessary tool to keep us safe.
We renew our resolve, stronger than ever before, to protect the United States and its allies from a vile enemy that has waged war on innocent life, and it's gone on too long.
Team Fox coverage to start our program now. John Roberts live at the White House with reaction there. David Lee Miller back on the ground live in London, and that is where we start this hour. David Lee.
Bill, although the British Prime Minister Theresa May says that authorities now know the names of the 3 attackers, that information is not yet being made public. According to a published report, however, one of the attackers was reported to police on 2 separate occasions for trying to recruit children to join ISIS. According to the Times of London, one of the perpetrators is the son of Pakistani parents who came to the UK seeking asylum. And now more gruesome details of the attack have emerged. The knife-wielding men slit the throats of some of their victims from behind in much the same way. ISIS captors have been seen executing victims on video. Prime Minister May called for a change in policy when it comes to going after terrorists.
We need to review our counter-terrorism strategy to make sure the police and security services have all the powers they need. If that means increasing the length of custodial sentences for terrorism-related offences, even apparently less serious offences, that is what we will do.
In early morning hours, more raids have taken place in East London. That follows arrests in that same area on Sunday. At this hour, at least 11 people are now in custody. Some of the detained were women wearing burqas and men with shaved heads and full beards, one dressed in traditional Islamic clothing. And lastly, ISIS has taken responsibility for the attack, but there is nothing so far to suggest that they offered any type of material support to the perpetrators. It is possible that the attackers, Bill, were simply inspired by ISIS, and now the terror group is trying to exploit this tragedy for its own ends. And underscoring just how serious this investigation is, Bill, behind me is a major artery here in central London, not far from where the attacks took place. The security perimeter remains in place.
David Lee, thank you. David Lee Miller on the ground there in London. Back to you next hour. Thank you for that. Shannon.
All right, for more on the Trump administration's reaction to the terror in London, let's go to the White House. Correspondent John Roberts now live and standing by. Good morning, John.
Shannon, good morning to you. And President Trump offering his full support to UK Prime Minister Theresa May in the wake of both the London and the Manchester attack, and of course that attack in London several weeks ago as well. Last night at the Ford Theater, the president reaffirming his commitment to fight terrorism around the world and to prevent such incidents from happening here in the United States. Listen here. This bloodshed must end. This bloodshed will end. As president, I will do what is necessary to prevent this threat from spreading to our shores and work every single day to protect the safety and security of our country, our communities, and our people. The president also citing the London attack as a reason why the Supreme Court should very quickly reinstate his travel ban, taking to Twitter this morning in a series of tweets saying, quote, the Justice Department should ask for an expedited hearing of the watered-down travel ban before the Supreme Court and seek much tougher version. Also tweeting, quote, People, the lawyers, and the courts can call it whatever they want, but I am calling it what we need and what it is, and that is, quote, a travel ban. The president also reiterated that the Department of Justice should have stuck with the original travel ban that he issued just after becoming president instead of the reissued, watered-down one, saying that the U.S. is also employing extreme vetting measures in some countries of origin in an attempt to better screen people who are coming into the United States. But, Shannon, if he has that travel ban in place, it puts extra leverage on countries of origin to get with the program and better vet people who are destined for the United States. Shannon?
Yeah, and John, as all these things go on, the White House says it wants to focus on some other things, positive things it says the president's doing. What are they going to announce on air traffic control today?
Well, the president really is kicking off a week of infrastructure issues. He wants to create a $1 trillion fund to revamp America's infrastructure. This morning at 11:30, he will talk about reforming the air traffic control system. This would create a public-private partnership and take responsibility for air traffic control out of the hands of the FAA and put it into the hands of a nonprofit corporation. During the campaign, you might remember, the president lamented the slow progress of the implementation of the next generation air traffic control program, moving from a ground-based radar system to a much more sophisticated GPS system. He insists that this will speed up that process. However, it's not going to happen overnight. There's a 3-year horizon for switching the air traffic control system from the FAA to this nonprofit corporation, though the White House points out that they have the support of just about everybody involved, including the unions and the airlines. Shannon?
All right, John Roberts live at the White House. Thank you.
So some of the headlines now in some of the major newspapers after London strike a similar theme. Here we go. Op-ed New York Times asks, against terror, is London pride enough? Wall Street Journal, jihad returns to Britain. Is there now broader support starting to build for a tougher stand against terror? Buck Sexton, former CIA officer, joins me now for a look at this, and good morning to you. You've got a lot to say, Buck. We talk tough repeatedly after we experience events like these. Is this one different or not?
There's definitely a sense of momentum here for the bad guys, that the terrorists have been accelerating the pace of the plotting. And when I think there was one very important point in Theresa May's speech yesterday that didn't get enough attention. There are 5 disrupted plots. There are ongoing efforts all the time by the security services in the UK, here in the US, and of course with all of our allies to stop these kinds of terrorist attacks from happening. So that is ongoing, and that's not even something people know about. So there is a sense that this is at a critical phase right now. And yes, people should go about their lives. They should remain vigilant. They shouldn't live in fear. But on a policy level, there do need to be some changes. And I do think that they need to look at whether they can do more of what has been done at this point successfully to prevent attacks like
That's an excellent point. I think the other point is 12 days ago in Manchester, there's no connection between this killer in Manchester and the 3 that were involved on Saturday night. These are different groups operating in different cells, inspired by perhaps the same call to kill anyone they can.
Same ideology. It looks like these could be different forms of attack. These individuals, we'll find out soon, we don't even know their names, in the London attack might have been self-radicalized, might have had no connection whatsoever to the Islamic State officially, but the ideologies enough.
Point being, that is even more worrying when you cannot track it. Remember after Manchester, they said this is a network that's operating here. Well, that network is thriving now.
Right. You're addressing networks. You're addressing specific cells of jihadists who have radicalized, and also individuals who have just been able to come to the same conclusion that they should engage in violence on behalf of jihad, which is why when Theresa May brought up dealing with the internet service providers, looking at major social media platforms, I can understand that impulse and that push. But that is an incredibly complicated set of issues. You can have places like Facebook and Twitter and others that do their own self-policing, but the moment this becomes governments getting involved, it's very hard to parse where they should draw those lines about what gets shut down online. And even if they try and come up with a worthwhile, workable agreement, as I'm sure Prime Minister May would like to, there are the additional difficulties of new platforms, new apps, new ways of sharing information the government won't necessarily be up on. So that's a huge problem.
Last point. Are we doing something dramatically different than what England is doing today?
No, we're looking at this problem from many of the same vantage points. In fact, I think Theresa May and Donald Trump are closer on this issue in terms of dealing with the Islamist ideology than what people realize. Yeah, I do think that's the case. They may need to look at stiffer sentences for terrorism-related offensive. That was mentioned. In this country, material support, something like that, will get you decades in prison. In the UK, it tends to be a whole lot less. So that may be a place where they can actually...
Sometimes just the sniff in this country will put you in jail.
For quite a long time.
Thank you, Buck. Talk to you real soon, okay? All right, Shannon, what else is coming up today?
We have got a powerful lineup still to come on America's Newsroom. Congressman Peter King will tell us how we can keep the attacks like the ones in London from happening here at home. Former police chief Ed Davis also here to weigh in on that. Plus, Fox News senior political analyst Britt Hume on former FBI Director James Comey. Of course, Thursday, a big day as he goes before the Senate Intelligence Committee. What will be here? What will he not talk about? We know that some of that testimony has been vetted with the special counsel, so we'll see.
That'd be must-see TV regardless, right? We'll look for the contents, the context, the tone, and all of that as we go forward. Britain now coming to grips with a third attack now in the span of just 3 months in England.
I think what we need to do today is to recognise we have not stopped radicalisation taking place in our schools, our prisons and our mosques. And I don't think you can deal with the problem until first you come clean about what you've got wrong.
So the British Prime Minister Theresa May with strong words over the past 48 hours. Will that translate into a crackdown for her people? But is this too little too late? A deeper analysis on all of that in a moment. Plus, there's this today.
Powerful display of resolve and unity. Some of pop music's biggest stars joining Ariana Grande in Manchester to benefit the victims of that deadly bombing 2 weeks ago.
Back here at home, there is a big hearing this week, as we just mentioned. James Comey will testify publicly. Republican Senator John Barrasso on what he is watching and listening for this week. He's live next.
You know, most stories have two sides to them. At some point, we'll hear the president's side, but I frankly think we need to hear Mr. Comey's side and find out what other questions we need to ask after he answers the questions this week.
We're following reports of a shooting in the Orlando area. We're told the sheriffs have responded to a shooting near a campus of Full Sail University in Orlando. It's a small college in that area. Now, we're just getting tweets out from the Orange County Sheriff's Office in Florida. Their Twitter account says that they're working a shooting scene that has been stabilized. They say multiple fatalities, but the situation is contained. The sheriff will brief very soon. We'll keep an eye on it and keep you informed.
His decisions have been, I think, highly questionable. We'll see why he was prepared in that meeting the way he was. Said he had a round of murder board kind of questions before he went to see the president.
Senator Roy Blunt on James Comey and his private talks with President Trump. We have Thursday's hearing live. It's already making headlines, as you can imagine. Politico writes it this way. Comey hearing consumes Washington. Republican Senator John Barrasso with me now to talk about this. And, sir, thank you for your time. And got some breaking news going on, so if we get interrupted, please understand. How important is this hearing? What do you think it will do to clarify some of the reporting or the story that we know to date, sir?
Well, I think it is important. I think it will be clarifying. People want to hear the tone and the context, not just what the former FBI director has to say, but also what he tells us that the president had to say in their meeting in the Oval Office. But that's just one of the hearings this week by this select committee on intelligence. They're also going to be meeting with the director of national intelligence, with the acting director of the FBI on Wednesday. So I think it's an important week on this matter.
Okay, Mark Warner, Democrat, will have a big role this week. He was asked whether or not there's a fingerprint on all this, and this is what he said just Sunday.
I think if there are inappropriate indication of financial ties, we would look at those. We've not seen those to date. There's a lot of smoke. We have no smoking gun, but every week there's more smoke that appears, and we've got to sort through it.
No smoking gun, he says. What can you add on that, Senator?
Well, I think that's why the hearings are important. As you say, it is a bipartisan hearing. You have 100 U.S. senators who are committed to make sure that the United States remains safe and secure and strong, and we're looking for answers. But this hearing alone is not going to consume Congress. There's a lot of things we need to do. I was at home in Wyoming, and people are expecting results from this Congress, and that's the issues of the week: infrastructure, health care, tax reform, regulatory reform, the things we need to do to make sure we have a strong and healthy economy. That's what the polls tell you, and what I hear at home is the most important thing on people's minds.
There's a question about why Samantha Power would request the unmasking of certain names. Now, she was the ambassador of the UN, and the former AG McCasey was asked about that on Sunday, too. I want you to listen to how he characterized this and then give us an explanation here.
Brennan could, as part of the intelligence community, unmask names. That was part of his remit. Right. Susan Rice, it's somewhat stranger because usually the national security advisor doesn't get involved at that level. But Samantha Power, that's totally unheard of.
Wow. Totally unheard of. Is there an explanation for this, do you know, Senator?
Not that I have seen yet. I mean, to me, the reason the Obama administration would make this information available to Samantha Power, I don't have an explanation or an understanding of that. That's why I think these hearings that we're having are going to be so informative, because they may find things that the Obama administration has done, that candidate Clinton had done. So Americans want answers to this, but this cannot be all-consuming. We have a country where people want to get to work, want to put food on the table, want to get their kids off to school, and want to move forward.
Just give us a sense of listening to the context and the tone, and how important that is when the former director characterizes his conversation with the president. How are we to understand that?
Well, I think that is very important, and why I think people will be watching that, but also the context of how this was said. So we're going to be watching what the former director has to say and what he tells us about what the president said. But people ultimately want to get to the truth. As you said, Mark Warner has pointed out, there is no smoking gun. There is no evidence here. We want to know exactly what's happening, but we do know that the Russians tried to influence the elections, not just in the United States, but in France, in England, in Germany. They are trying to undermine democracy around the world. That's what Vladimir Putin's efforts are. Anything he can do to weaken the United States plays to him. And what he said is he wants to get rid of NATO, and he wants to restore the former Soviet Union. And whatever techniques he has to use, we see that he is learning with each election. They are getting better with their techniques, which is to reason to me to be focused on Russia, their involvement, but also making sure America is strong.
Here we go. Comey's on Thursday, and you point out that hearing that precedes it on Wednesday. Two big moments for the Hill. Thank you, sir. John Barrasso, the Republican from Wyoming. Back now to the breaking news. Thank you.
And we are waiting an update from Orange County Sheriff's Department. That's in Florida, the Orlando area. They are now reporting, their Twitter feed at least, saying officially there are multiple fatalities after a shooting in Orlando. You're looking there live at the scene. We understand the sheriff will brief the media shortly. They say they're waiting on gathering accurate info. As soon as they take us there, we'll take you.
Seems to be the northeastern part of Orlando. Back there on scene in a moment. Plus, there is this coming up today. That's a peaceful rally descending into chaos. Trump supporters on one side, opponents on the other. What set this off in a moment? It is 25 minutes past the hour, 9 o'clock in Orlando, Florida, and this is a scene that we do not want to wake up to on any day, including this day. After all the news over the weekend, we're awaiting an update from police and the Sheriff's Department. Multiple deaths in Orlando reported this hour after a shooting near Forsyth and Full Sail. That's in the area of Full Sail University, northeastern Orlando. The shooting scene apparently has been stabilized. Multiple fatalities, we're told. Situation contained. The sheriff will brief in a moment here, but that's the tweet that was sent out from the Sheriff's Department a short time ago. So we're keeping an eye on this, and we're certainly hoping and praying for the best there today in Central Florida. We'll be back on that story in just a moment here.
And this Fox News alert, a pro-Trump free speech rally in downtown Portland, Oregon, draws thousands of rival protesters. 14 people arrested, more than a dozen weapons seized. 9 days after a man accused of verbally abusing two young women on a commuter train, then allegedly stabbed to death 2 men who tried to intervene and another man as well. Dan Springer is live in Portland. All right, so Dan, break it down for us. How much violence was there at these kind of competing rallies?
Yeah, hi, Shannon. Well, there was a lot of tense moments in this park and just up the block in the next park when it looked like there might be a full-scale riot between anarchists who were all dressed in black and covering their faces with bandanas and the police. But the Portland PD and all the state and federal cops who were here lining this area did an amazing job showing great restraint. Counter-protesters threw bricks and bottles at police who formed a wall between them and the Trump supporters. Cops deployed flashbangs and pepper spray, eventually moving the anti-fascist group back. Police made 14 arrests. They also confiscated a bunch of potential weapons: knives, bats, sticks, road flares, chains, brass knuckles. But with all that, there were no arrests, no assaults, no injuries, and very little, if any, property damage.
For the number of protests we've seen in Portland in the last 7 months, this was one of the more active, vocal protests. But overall, at the end of the day, things worked out pretty well.
And with all the practice Portland police have had recently, this went textbook yesterday in their response. Shannon?
All right, so why was the Portland mayor trying to stop these rallies? We heard so much of that in advance.
Well, yeah, Mayor Ted Wheeler was very scared of a lot of violence in this park, and so he asked the pro-Trump folks to cancel their permit. He wanted them to not have their rally here in the park. When they said no, he then appealed to the federal government, which held the permit for the rally, and asked them to pull that permit, but the federal government decided to say no. There were people from California here who clashed with counter-protesters in Berkeley. Many are clearly agitators who are comfortable sparring with the anti-Trump far left. But this shout fest had added tension of coming just a week after 2 men were stabbed to death on a commuter train here in Portland. The accused attacker, Jeremy Christian, had been verbally assaulting 2 women he believed were Muslims. The stabbing victims intervened and had their throats cut, but the Trump supporters disavow any connection to Jeremy Christian and say they actually kicked him out of a rally here in Portland a couple months ago. Shannon?
Yeah, and he allegedly was supporting other political candidates, not Trump, so we'll see. Dan Springer, thank you very much.
Let me get back to this other major story of the day now. In the wake of the new terror raids in London, new concerns here at home. Are we too focused on being too PC?
The political correctness that we experience here in America prevents us from holding the Muslim community responsible for allowing this festering to take place in their midst. They're the ones who should be offended by it. They're the ones who should be standing up.
So this issue today, to be debated in a moment, fair and balanced on that, coming up.
Plus, new backlash from the left over President Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris climate deal. But are Democrats overstating things? We're going to ask former New Hampshire Governor John Sununu.
Thank you very much. I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris.
So in a moment here, we're going to get a briefing from the Sheriff's Department there in Orlando, Florida, Orange County. Multiple deaths after a shooting near a university in the northeastern part of the city there. Shooting scenes have been stabilized, we're told, but there are multiple fatalities. Situation contained. That's according to the Sheriff's Department, the information it's putting out for the moment. So they're now starting to set up for this briefing, and when that happens and it begins, we'll bring it to you live. So we're working on this right now, so stay tuned for more on that. Cool.
Police conducting more raids and making more arrests as the London terror investigation unfolds. London's police chief says the 3 alleged attackers have been identified, but their names not yet being made public. There are reports at least one of them was known to police. ISIS has claimed responsibility. Meantime, British Prime Minister Theresa May saying Britain must do, quote, much more to combat Islamic extremism. And President Trump speaking out as well with blunt words on keeping the nation safe from terror, saying we need to stop being so politically correct. As he tweets about his travel ban being blocked by federal courts, the president saying this via Twitter: the Justice Department should ask for an expedited hearing of the watered-down travel ban before the Supreme Court and seek much tougher version. Katie Pavlich is the editor for townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. And Marianne Marsh is a former senior advisor to John Kerry. Welcome to you both.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, so, Katie, it's finally arrived at the Supreme Court, as the president promised it would. But so far, he's gotten skunked in the lower courts.
He has. I mean, it's a big risk that the administration is taking. It's the first big step and test at the Supreme Court for the administration. But based on what the administration Justice Department is arguing, they're saying, look, these lower courts are taking into account the statements that the president made on the campaign trail, which are irrelevant to the principles of the travel ban. They argue that he has the executive authority and power to protect the United States under U.S. code from any foreign threat. And that's exactly what he's arguing that he's doing. They're arguing these are failed states. They want to make sure that terrorists are not coming to the United States from these countries where ISIS has been harboring fighters and training people. They want to make sure those people aren't going to Europe, that they're not going to the United States, and they argue it's because they're failed states, not because it's based on religion.
Well, and he tweeted this weekend about political correctness. He said, you know, much of the opposition to the travel ban is about that, and it's time to get rid of that or things are going to get worse. An interesting interview on Fox and Friends this morning with Dr. James Mitchell, who interrogated Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, obviously linked to 9/11, and he said, listen, these guys look at us and think, you're not going to do anything tough because the U.S. is too PC. They're worried about how they're viewed in the world and hurting anyone's feelings. And here's what he said about how they use our own freedoms against us.
Under the guise of political freedom, people who want to destroy us can come to our country, they can set up mosques, they can spread their jihadi message, and they can recruit people into these things, all without committing any crimes. And when you push back against that, they claim that you're violating their religious freedom. So the hard work of radicalization is already done before we do anything, before a crime is committed.
So, Marianne, where do we draw the line with political correctness in a situation like this, where they're truly, it's life and death?
In this case, Shannon, this has nothing to do with political correctness and everything to do with politics. And by the way, it's unconstitutional what Donald Trump has proposed. He's offered no evidence whatsoever a travel ban would succeed. This is a religion ban, period. And if, by his logic, the fact is, if you take it at face value, we should be banning everyone from the United Kingdom coming here. Everyone from France coming here, because they've had all the terror attacks of late. So that's what it would do. That is not what Donald Trump is doing. And he is playing to his political base. The only evidence he's shown here was throughout the campaign by his demagoguery of religion, Muslim religion in particular. He's done it since he's gotten to the White House. He continues to do it in words, deeds, and tweets. And he's offered all the evidence in the world that it has everything to do with religion and nothing to do with our national security. Last point here. Well, he has failed to appoint anybody to the actual agencies who are in charge of protecting us: Department of Justice, Department of the State Department, FBI, DHS. It's like Home Alone there. So the people who are supposed to be protecting us aren't, and this ban doesn't do that, and it won't pass constitutional muster in the courts, which he has also denigrated judges, the judiciary, and the foundation of our democracy by doing just that.
There's a lot to unpack there, which I'll let Katie do. But first of all, I mean, there are a lot of appointments that need to be made. Many have been, but still a lot of empty slots, and those have got to be filled. But there's nothing in the text of this travel ban, one or two, that says anything about religious animus. The judges are looking to his comments during the campaign season, and now people are asking about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the fact that she had some very negative things to say about this president during the campaign season, and saying, hey, if you're going to look at his statements, should you also look at hers and ask whether she's the right person to be weighing in on this ban, Katie?
Right, because she decided to get political in a position that she should not be getting political in, considering she's now judging some of these cases that the president is bringing to the Supreme Court. But I do want to say one more time, we've been through this so many times on the show, on this network, this travel ban has nothing to do with Islam. There are a number of Christians in places like Syria and Iraq previously under the first ban who are under genocide, who cannot come to the United States under this ban. So to act like this is just about Islam is not only disingenuous, but it does a disservice in terms of the people who are really suffering in those countries. On the other issue, the Manchester suicide bomber's father came to the UK from Libya seeking asylum, and he was arrested after the suicide bombing because he was in Libya and accused of being part of Al-Qaeda there. And so his son traveled back and forth to that country. The travel ban has legitimacy President Obama is the one who originally came up with the 7 countries that were in the original travel ban the Trump administration put forward. This is not about religion. This is about being proactive and not allowing the United States to become a place like the United Kingdom, where they've seen 3 terror attacks in the past 3 months that could have been prevented by not being overly tolerant of extremist viewpoints that they know are extreme, and blaming themselves rather than the problem, which is Islamic extremism inside of their communities.
Well, and Marianne, I talked with DHS Secretary Kelly over the weekend, and he said the geography is one of the only things that is helping us right now, because he said it is a consistent, nonstop threat. He said they're relentless in trying to get here. He says that's why Europe's getting more of it than we are right now. But he pointed to geography as one of the main issues, that the easier it is for us to let people flow here, the more threats that he and the people of DHS who are working around the clock have to combat.
Exactly. I mean, that is exactly the point.
Marianne,
that's a false choice. That's a false choice. We don't have to pick between our security and the Constitution. It is inextricably linked. And the Constitution was set up for this very reason. So Donald Trump can't be King George III. We are a country of laws, and nobody is above the law.
No one is entitled to come here.
And stopping people from coming in here by looking at who they are,
it is
looking
a
at their
privilege,
background,
not a right to come to this country.
It's not inextricable. Look, that is a false choice. And the fact is,
you just let everyone in from failed
for
states.
240 years by following the law and making sure we do that. And that's what we should continue to do.
All right. Well, the choice is now up to the Supreme Court. So we'll see which one they make.
It is.
Good to see both of you. Katie, Marianne, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Right about 20 minutes now before the hour, the British Prime Minister Theresa May saying enough is enough, vowing to ramp up the fight against terror.
Yet despite the progress we have made in recent years and the successes we've enjoyed, we must do more to respond to the changing threat to our country and our way of life.
She has some ideas, and a government's first responsibility is the security of its own people. Our experts take that on next.
Plus, a frightening scene for thousands of sports fans rushing out of a city square after what they thought was another terror attack. Panic in northern Italy as soccer fans scattered after a false alarm. Now, witnesses had said they heard a loud sound, and that set off a massive stampede as thousands of people crowded into a large room to watch the Champions League final between Juventus and Real Madrid. More than 1,500 people were hurt, and at least one person taken away on a stretcher. And that, again, Bill, feeds into what terrorists hope to accomplish, that sense of panic when we try to go about our lives.
Think about this concert that took place in Manchester yesterday. I mean, the lines they went for hours trying to clear security, and on it goes. So that from Italy is scare, but everything is okay. Now back to London right now, 15 minutes before the hour. Theresa May said this.
Since the emergence of the threat from Islamist-inspired terrorism, our country has made significant progress in disrupting plots and protecting the public. But it is time to say enough is enough.
So she's saying all the right things. What about action? That comes next. Or does it? The attack that began on London Bridge, leaving 7 dead, dozens injured. The details from eyewitnesses are horrific. Jillian Turner, former national security staffer under Presidents George W. Bush and Obama. Robin Simcox, terror and national security analyst for the Margaret Thatcher Center and Heritage Foundation. Good morning to both of you. Action next, Robin. What is it?
Well, one of the things that I was somewhat encouraged by Theresa May's words, and I think we do need to make sure that these aren't just words, because we need to remember Tony Blair used to talk terribly tough about terrorism, then didn't really do much about it. But Theresa May talked about some of the embarrassing and honest conversations that people needed to have. I'm hoping that's a sign and her encouraging the Muslim communities in the UK to look at the roots of some of these terrorists, look where they are. Look how people operate like this in their communities, begin to maybe challenge some of the ideological and theological even roots behind these attacks. I hope that's the next step.
There's an election on Thursday. They're back to campaigning today. We'll see whether or not the events of this past weekend have an effect on the vote. I thought the most telling thing she said yesterday, Jillian, was the, quote, embarrassing conversations that are bound to happen. What did you make of her comments?
You know, what she means by that is really that she thinks the Muslim community inside Britain needs to really rally to its own defense. She thinks that missing and I say we because the United States to a certain degree shares this problem, a sort of self-policing mechanism which will help us ultimately to rid the world of terrorism. And this is a good idea.
We've been talking about that for some time, right, Jillian?
It's a lot of good ideas, but what I fear here is that what the Prime Minister said yesterday in front of 10 Downing Street, what she said 2 weeks ago in the wake of Manchester, was very appealing to most people worldwide, not just to Britons, because it's very easy to share the sentiment that we're tired of this, enough is enough, we don't want this assault on our way of life to continue. But for politicians and heads of government, that is the easy, getting the rhetoric and the sentiment right is really the easy part of the equation. The hard part is designing and then implementing policies that help forge a solution. And I think this is where she so far has failed. And I'm taking into account her 6 years on record as the Home Secretary for her nation. So she does share a degree of culpability.
Yeah, you raise a number of interesting points. Nigel Farage said this, and Robin, listen to the tail end of this comment from Sunday. Watch.
When they were pushed by people like me a couple of years ago, said they would use the power to stop people who had fought, for example, in Syria, from coming back into our country, over 400 known jihadi fighters from Syria have come back into Britain, and we've only stopped one.
That has to be not only intimidating, but downright scary for those living in England. Well, when you consider, Robin, that there appears to be no direct personal connection between each of these attacks. They're just doing their own thing when they want to do it.
Yeah, and this is the problem, the size and the scale of the threat facing the UK. There's 3,000 core terror suspects that MI5 are particularly concerned about, but beyond that, there's a broader core of 23,000 that have been on the radar at some point, and you see people like Khalid Massoud, who carried out the attack in Westminster last March. He was somebody that the security services had put on the periphery. He was someone they thought they no longer needed to be worried about as an imminent threat. But of course, this isn't a science, it's an art, picking who are the ones that will go operational and when. And of course, the security services aren't going to get it right every time, but that's why they need legal support. The reference, for example, of people coming back from Syria. It's not always easy to stop British citizens coming back into a country. Sometimes we can take their passport away if they're dual nationals, but there are restrictions to what we can do sometimes.
Well, you can't watch somebody 24 hours a day if you've got 23,000 to watch. 23,000. Jillian, last word on this?
Almost 1,000 native Britons at this point that we know of have traveled to Iraq and Syria to train with ISIS, and over half of them have returned to the United Kingdom. Those people present a very clear and direct national security threat to that country and to the entire Western world. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's incorrect for certain analysts, as they've been saying, that this is not a native problem. Radical ideology is something that is always externally imposed on the West. That's not the case, and Britain is the best example of that.
Jillian Turner, thank you. Robin Simcox, more to come, unfortunately. Thanks to both of you for coming on today.
Phil.
Thank you.
We are awaiting an update now from the Orange County Sheriff's Department in Florida. The Orlando area, there has been a shooting, they confirm, with multiple fatalities. Our local affiliate says the FBI is on the way to the scene. Our own Catherine Herridge cautions that the FBI often responds to these kinds of active shooter or massive fatality calls. She says it doesn't necessarily mean there's any link to terrorism or thought of that at this time, so she gives us that caution. But there are multiple deaths confirmed in Orlando. As soon as we get that update, we'll take you there.